The Threxian invasion fleet had encircled Earth for 6 hours. 11,000 warships arranged in a perfect containment sphere that Grand Admiral Vesik Korath's tactical staff assured him made resistance mathematically impossible. When every light on the planet's surface went dark within the same 4-second window, and the Admiral understood, watching his sensor displays fill with sudden, inexplicable silence, that something had just gone catastrophically wrong with everything he thought he understood about the species below him. It was not a power failure. Grand Admiral Korath's analysts confirmed that within minutes, ruling out the obvious explanations one by one with mounting unease. Earth's power grids had not failed. They had been deliberately, simultaneously shut down, across every continent, every city, every settlement, in a coordinated action that would have required a level of centralized infrastructure control the Threxian Compact's own intelligence assessments had specifically concluded humanity did not possess. "Explain this," Korath demanded of his intelligence chief, a methodical officer named Threll Vasson, who had spent 4 years compiling the invasion's comprehensive threat assessment, a document that had, until this exact moment, been considered the most thorough analysis of human capability the Compact had ever produced. "I cannot yet, Admiral," Threll admitted, studying data that contradicted every projection his team had spent years developing. "Our assessment concluded humanity's power infrastructure was fragmented across competing national authorities, incapable of unified action on this scale. What we are observing suggests either a coordination capability we failed to detect entirely, or something considerably more concerning." The fleet's sensors, adjusted for the sudden absence of surface illumination, began registering something Korath's tactical staff struggled to properly categorize. Not weapons fire, not fleet movements, something quieter, more diffuse, spreading across the darkened planet's surface in patterns that resisted easy analysis. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, voice carrying the particular strain of someone delivering information they did not yet fully understand themselves, "we're detecting massive electromagnetic emissions across the entire surface, inconsistent with standard power grid operation. The pattern doesn't match anything in our threat archive." Grand Admiral Korath had commanded invasion fleets across 9 successful campaigns spanning 3 decades, and had never once encountered a target species that responded to imminent conquest by extinguishing every visible sign of their own civilization, rather than mounting the desperate, doomed resistance his experience had taught him to expect. The absence of expected behavior unsettled him more deeply than any conventional counterattack could have. What Korath did not yet understand, and would not fully understand for several more critical hours, was that Earth's darkness represented not desperation, but the opening move of a strategy humanity's military command had spent decades developing specifically for a scenario their own intelligence assessments had long identified as their species' most dangerous vulnerability: contact with a technologically superior alien force possessing overwhelming conventional military advantage. General Sarah Chen, commanding humanity's unified planetary defense coordination from a bunker complex buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, watched the same darkened Earth on her own displays with a calm that belied the magnitude of what her command had just initiated. "Confirm grid shutdown complete across all sectors," she said to her communications staff, her voice carrying the particular steadiness of someone executing a plan rehearsed so many times that the actual moment of implementation felt almost anticlimactic. "Begin Phase 2. Phase 2, as it would later be documented in military histories on both sides of the conflict, represented humanity's calculated exploitation of a fundamental asymmetry the Threxian Compact's overwhelming technological superiority had never required them to consider. Every previous species the Compact had encountered and conquered had responded to invasion with resistance calibrated to match or exceed their own technological capability. Conventional military engagements, where superior Threxian firepower reliably produced decisive, rapid victories within hours or days. Humanity's defense strategy operated on an entirely different premise. One General Chen's planning staff had developed specifically around a technological reality. The compact's intelligence assessments had catastrophically underestimated. Earth's power grid shutdown was not merely defensive. It was the activation trigger for a planet-wide electromagnetic disruption system, decades in development, designed specifically to exploit the compact's own technological sophistication as a vulnerability rather than an advantage. Their sensor arrays, their targeting systems, their communication networks, all of it depends on electromagnetic precision our own technology simply doesn't require to the same degree. Chen had explained to her command staff during the strategy's final approval briefing, months before the Threxian fleet ever arrived in Earth's system. We can't match their firepower ship for ship. We were never going to be able to. But we can make their firepower considerably less useful if we disrupt the electromagnetic environment their entire targeting infrastructure depends on. Take away their ability to precisely track and target from orbit, and 11,000 warships stop being an unstoppable force. They become 11,000 very expensive, very confused targets. The system General Chen activated across Earth's surface, drawing on power reserves specifically isolated from the primary grid precisely to remain operational during a full shutdown, generated electromagnetic interference across a spectrum calibrated through years of careful intelligence gathering on Threxian sensor technology to specifically degrade the orbital targeting precision the invasion fleet's entire tactical doctrine depended upon. Grand Admiral Korath's tactical displays, which had shown crisp, precise targeting data across Earth's surface for the preceding 6 hours, began degrading within minutes of the coordinated blackout, sensor resolution dropping in a manner his engineering staff initially attributed to equipment malfunction before recognizing, with mounting alarm, the deliberate signature of sophisticated electromagnetic countermeasures. Admiral targeting precision has dropped to approximately 30% of baseline capability across the entire fleet, his weapons officer reported. A tremor of genuine concern entering a voice trained for 11,000 years of compact military tradition to maintain unwavering composure. Orbital bombardment accuracy is degraded to the point where surface strikes carry unacceptable risk of catastrophic targeting error. This is not possible, Korath said, though the data scrolling across his own display suggested otherwise with increasingly undeniable clarity. Our intelligence assessment specifically concluded humanity lacked the technological sophistication to develop effective countermeasures against compact sensor and targeting systems. Our intelligence assessment appears to have been incomplete, Admiral, Threll Vasson said, studying data that represented, in real time, the systematic unraveling of 4 years of careful strategic analysis. I am detecting evidence that humanity has spent considerable resources developing electromagnetic disruption technology, specifically calibrated to compact sensor frequencies, technology that would have required detailed knowledge of our own system's technical specifications, that our security protocols should have made impossible for them to acquire. Grand Admiral Korath's fleet, still numerically overwhelming, still possessing firepower theoretically capable of reducing Earth's surface to glass within hours, found itself, for the first time in the compact's considerable conquest history, unable to translate that overwhelming advantage into decisive tactical action. Orbital strikes risked catastrophic collateral damage without reliable targeting precision. Ground invasion forces, unable to coordinate with degraded orbital support, faced the prospect of deploying into an electromagnetic environment that would leave them substantially cut off from fleet command and tactical support. What are our options, Admiral? Threll asked, watching a strategic situation that 4 years of intelligence preparation had never once suggested was possible. Korath considered the darkened planet below his fleet, understanding with mounting unease that he was facing a species that had, apparently, spent considerable time and resources preparing specifically for this exact scenario. A species whose defensive strategy had been built not around matching compact technology, an impossible proposition given the vast disparity in their respective capabilities, but around identifying and exploiting the specific technological dependencies that overwhelming superiority had created. "Deploy reconnaissance probes," he ordered finally. "I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with before committing to any further action. If humanity has developed countermeasures this sophisticated against our targeting systems, I need to know what else they may have prepared that our intelligence assessment failed to anticipate." The reconnaissance probes, launched within the hour, provided data that further compounded the compact fleet's tactical uncertainty. Earth's surface, though darkened to conventional visual and standard electromagnetic sensors, showed clear evidence of continued, coordinated activity, defensive positions being reinforced, civilian populations moving through evacuation routes clearly rehearsed well in advance of the invasion's arrival, and more concerning to Korath's tactical staff, evidence of additional technological systems, whose exact function remained frustratingly unclear, given the degraded sensor precision the countermeasures had imposed. "They are not merely defending reactively," Admiral Threll reported, compiling data that painted an increasingly unsettling picture of a species that had clearly anticipated this exact scenario with far greater sophistication than 4 years of compact intelligence gathering had ever detected. This level of coordination, the specific calibration of their countermeasures to our exact sensor specifications, the rehearsed evacuation patterns, all of this suggests preparation spanning years, possibly decades, specifically for a first-contact invasion scenario, matching almost precisely the parameters of our own approach. "You are suggesting humanity anticipated this invasion specifically," Korath said, "with enough precision to develop targeted countermeasures against our exact technological specifications, years before we ever arrived in their system." "I am suggesting, Admiral, that humanity's own historical pattern of military development, which our intelligence assessment noted but significantly underweighted in our threat calculations, involves extensive investment in asymmetric countermeasures specifically designed to offset conventional military disadvantages against numerically or technologically superior opponents. Their own recorded history contains numerous instances of exactly this strategic pattern, technologically inferior forces developing specific, targeted countermeasures against superior opponents' particular vulnerabilities, rather than attempting to match their overall capability directly. I believe, based on what we are currently observing, that our threat assessment fundamentally underestimated the priority humanity's military doctrine places on exactly this kind of asymmetric preparation. Grand Admiral Korath spent the following 18 hours attempting to develop an effective response to a tactical situation his considerable experience had never once prepared him to navigate. A numerically overwhelming fleet, rendered strategically uncertain not through direct confrontation, but through the systematic degradation of the precise technological advantages his entire invasion doctrine had assumed would remain reliably available throughout the campaign. Limited ground incursions, launched with reduced orbital support, encountered defensive resistance calibrated with unsettling precision to exploit the specific tactical limitations the electromagnetic countermeasures had imposed on compact forces. Defenders who seemed to understand exactly which capabilities had been degraded and which remained functional, adjusting their own tactics accordingly with a responsiveness that suggested extensive rehearsal against exactly this kind of engagement. They have been preparing for us specifically, Korath finally acknowledged, 20 hours into an invasion that his original tactical projections had suggested would achieve full planetary submission within the first 6 hours. Not merely preparing generally for eventual alien contact, but preparing specifically for an engagement matching almost precisely the technological and tactical parameters our own compact forces represent. Admiral, Threll said, delivering intelligence that would fundamentally reshape the Compact's understanding of the campaign they had launched. I believe I understand now what our original threat assessment failed to properly account for. Humanity did not develop this defensive strategy in response to our specific arrival. The preparation timeline, based on the sophistication and specificity of what we are currently encountering, suggests development spanning at minimum a decade, likely longer. I believe humanity has been actively preparing for a first contact invasion scenario for a considerable period before our fleet ever entered their system, developing countermeasures against a range of plausible technological profiles a superior alien invasion force might present, and that our own compact technological signature happened to fall within parameters their preparation had already anticipated. Grand Admiral Korath considered this assessment with the full weight of a campaign that had, within 20 hours, transformed from a straightforward conquest operation into something considerably more uncertain and costly than any invasion in his considerable career had previously required. They built their entire defense doctrine, he said slowly, around the assumption that overwhelming alien invasion was not merely possible, but likely enough to justify decades of dedicated preparation, despite having no specific knowledge of when or from what direction such an invasion might actually arrive. That appears to be an accurate characterization, Admiral, Threll confirmed, and I believe it reflects something considerably more significant than simple tactical preparedness. It suggests a species whose relationship with existential threat is fundamentally different from every other assembly-adjacent civilization in our conquest archive. Most species we have encountered required direct experience of alien contact before developing serious defensive countermeasures against it. Humanity appears to have developed sophisticated, technologically specific countermeasures against a threat they had never directly experienced, based purely on their own historical understanding of what overwhelming technological asymmetry has meant, repeatedly, throughout their own recorded history. Grand Admiral Vesic Korath withdrew his fleet to a defensive holding pattern beyond Earth's immediate orbital space 43 hours after the invasion's initial deployment, a decision that would generate considerable scrutiny from compact high command in the months that followed, but one he considered, based on the mounting tactical uncertainty his forces continued to face. The only responsible option available given how thoroughly his original threat assessment had failed to anticipate humanity's actual defensive capability. His formal report to Compact High Command, filed 1 week after the withdrawal, contained an assessment that would fundamentally reshape the Compact's broader strategic understanding of human civilization, an assessment considerably more sobering than the confident conquest projections that had authorized the invasion in the first place. We approached Earth with overwhelming numerical and technological superiority, based on a comprehensive 4-year intelligence assessment that concluded, with high confidence, that humanity possessed no meaningful capability to counter a compact invasion force of the size and sophistication we deployed, Korath wrote. That assessment proved fundamentally incomplete in ways that nearly cost us the campaign entirely, and that I believe warrant considerably more extensive study before any future engagement with human forces is authorized. Humanity did not defeat our invasion through superior firepower, which they manifestly do not possess, nor through numerical advantage, which likewise does not favor them. They defeated our invasion's initial phase through decades of patient, specific preparation for exactly the kind of overwhelming technological threat we represented, developing countermeasures calibrated with unsettling precision against vulnerabilities our own overwhelming superiority had never previously required us to consider defending. I do not believe humanity's darkness, when our fleet first surrounded their world, represented desperation or surrender. I believe, based on everything our forces subsequently encountered, that it represented the opening move of a defense strategy. This species had been quietly preparing for considerably longer than any previous compact intelligence assessment ever suspected. Built around a sobering premise, their own military doctrine appears to have internalized long before we ever arrived. That overwhelming force, however impressive, is only as effective as the precise technological advantages it depends upon, and that a sufficiently patient, sufficiently prepared opponent does not need to match that force directly in order to render it considerably less decisive than its numbers alone would suggest. General Sarah Chen, reviewing the aftermath of Earth's first confirmed alien contact from her command bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, found herself facing considerably more difficult questions from her own civilian government than the tactical uncertainty she had successfully imposed on the Threxian invasion fleet. "They'll be back," she told the assembled emergency council, 6 days after the fleet's withdrawal, her tone carrying the same measured calm that had guided every decision throughout the initial engagement. "We didn't win this. We survived the opening move, and we made them uncertain enough to pull back and reassess. That's not the same as victory. That buys us time, and time is exactly what we need to prepare for whatever they decide to try next. Because I promise you, an empire that's conquered as many worlds as our intelligence suggests, doesn't simply give up because their first attempt didn't go according to plan." "How long do we have?" one council member asked, the question every person in that room had been waiting to voice since the fleet's withdrawal became confirmed fact. "I don't know," Chen admitted. "Could be months, could be years. What I do know is that we spent decades preparing for exactly the scenario that just happened, and it worked well enough to survive contact with a force that outnumbered and outgunned us by every conventional measure. That preparation is the only reason Earth's lights are coming back on right now instead of this briefing happening in a crater. So whatever timeline they decide to work on next, we're going to spend every single day of it doing exactly what we did for the last 20 years before they arrived. Preparing for the version of this fight that assumes they come back smarter and stronger and considerably more prepared for what we just showed them we're capable of. Because that's the only strategy that's ever actually worked for us throughout our entire history. We don't win by matching strength with strength. We win by refusing to stop preparing, long after anyone reasonable would have assumed the threat wasn't coming, until the day it actually arrives and we're ready anyway. Earth's lights returned to full operation 72 hours after the initial blackout, the planet's surface illuminating once more beneath a sky now empty of the 11,000 warships that had, briefly and terrifyingly, promised the end of everything humanity had spent its entire history building. It was not a permanent victory. Every person involved in that first contact, human and Threxian alike, understood that the true test of humanity's decades of quiet, patient preparation still lay somewhere in an uncertain future neither side could yet fully predict. But for one brief, critical moment, when an overwhelming alien fleet had surrounded a planet its own commanders believed was moments away from certain conquest, Earth's lights had gone out, deliberately, purposefully, the opening move of a defense built across decades by a species that had never once stopped preparing for exactly the darkness that eventually found them, and had, when that darkness finally arrived, proven ready for it in ways that no invasion fleet's confident projections had ever accounted for.